The accusation levelled at Gareth Southgate is he doesn't pick the players that are on form. And number two, the big debate is why on earth is he still using a back three? So let's go through it. Start of all. Number one, he doesn't pick players on form. Not true. With the exception of Harry Maguire, every one of those players who started at the San Siro is in form. Sterling, playing well in a Chelsea team that aren't really playing well. Kane, who's scoring goals for Tottenham and has done in the early part of the season, doesn't always happen. Foden's been superb for Manchester City. Saka at the top of the league, just been part of a brilliant Arsenal performance against Brentford, and he had a big role in that. Rice hasn't had a great start with his club, West Ham, but there's no Phillips. Henderson's not 100%. You'd be hard-pressed to say on form that he didn't deserve to be in that team, in that position. Bellingham's playing for Dortmund in the Champions League right now. James performing better than Trent Alexander-Arnold, especially defensively on the right-hand side. Dyer's literally not played a game for England for 20 months, but has done so well for Spurs and has got leaner and fitter and sharper that he's been called back in from the cold. Walker, come on, whenever he's not in the Manchester City team, he's an absolute miss. They will tell you that possibly Ramsdale should have been in goal, possibly on form. But Nick Pope...
He's been superb as well.
He's not going to be the England goalkeeper. He cannot play with his feet, competently anyway, to operate the way that Gareth wants to play. But because he's in form, he was picked at the weekend. He was nominated for the Premier League Player of the Month in August after making 19 saves and keeping 2 clean sheets in 5 appearances. He's made the most saves in the Premier League this season, including 9 saves in 1 match against Crystal Palace. He has the highest save percentage of any other goalkeeper in the Premier League this season. So he was picked on form as well. So every single one of those players, with Maguire as the exception, I mentioned that, he's in form and he's been picked on form. There's also got to be factored into, whenever you're picking any sort of 11, the idea of team blend, team shapes, knocks, issues we're unaware of. But largely to suggest that this team was not picked on form is frankly ludicrous. If you have a problem with it, then I suggest probably your issue is with the fact that he's picked Harry Maguire, who was included by the manager because he's never let England down. He needs to keep the spirit up for the player who hasn't particularly had a great start to the season, or in fact a great 18 months for his club. He needs to maintain the balance in the team and keep him on side, because he knows for a fact he is going to need him when it comes to the World Cup. Do not get me wrong. Don't mischaracterise what I'm saying. It wasn't a great performance, but he did pick the players that are on form.
Right, I agree with you generally. I think there's a few players I would slightly disagree who I don't think have been greatly on form for their clubs. You and I discussed beforehand, I don't think Raheem Sterling, I personally don't, has been superb in a Chelsea shirt. He's been good at times. Yeah. I know you are, yeah. You looked at me, you went, what? You did that high voice again, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
But the games I've seen him, he's either... And I think he's superb, and I'm really pleased that he was the first player bought in the new era of Chelsea and everything he represents on and off the pitch. But for me, when I've seen him, I don't think he's been quite there yet. Saka, I would suggest, actually, out of those attacking front three of Arsenal, that he, just behind Jesus, he perhaps has been the least best.
I think he's been quiet. Yeah, I don't think he's had a bad start. But I still didn't. And he also created a goal on the weekend.
Declan Rice, who I love, absolutely love. I don't think he's been absolutely superb in a West Ham shirt, but I still wouldn't argue with any of that 11 being picked. And the Harry Maguire thing, and he made himself a really good point that before the Euros, he was out for 8 weeks?
Yeah,
and he was managed. And he still got into the team of the tournament. Yeah. And he got into the team of the tournament. So I think there's 5 games, 4 in the Europa League and 1 in the EFL Cup, where even if he doesn't play in the league, he can still play first-team football. And while it's not ideal, it's still absolutely fine. The bigger picture here for me is, why does he have to pick players in form?
Well, I'm just saying that is the accusation. A lot of people say he's got to pick players that are in form.
He doesn't have to.
He doesn't have to.
He has to have a blend
of
people that he trusts and people who are in form. And he's the one in the hot seat. There's 60 million England managers out there. He's the one who actually has the choice. And he's got to... You talked about getting the blend right. That's what he's got to do. And the fact that Harry Maguire has, in my opinion, been nothing short of superb in an England shirt and never let England down. And I thought he was more than decent. He wasn't brilliant, but he was more than decent the other night. I think justifies the fact that he's playing. And it was a big game for him, because if he had been really poor, then he would have been in trouble.
OK, so straight away, Ian McCartneys tweeted in. He said, utter drivel, form or no form, why back three and two holders? The whole let's not get beat mentality is getting boring. You're mischaracterising what I said. What I said is there's two debates. The first one is he doesn't pick players on form. That was what we were just talking about. The second question is, why is he playing a back three? Because in 9 of the 14 games that Gareth Southgate has played since the final of the European Championships, and most of that tournament, he's played a back four. But he chose to return to a 3 on a Friday. The 3 didn't work against Hungary. It hasn't worked again against Italy. Gareth historically hasn't trusted the defenders against the best attackers. So he's bulked up and gone with 3 instead of 2. But he knows, and we know, that as a result of that, you lose something in midfield. It does make you more pragmatic. What you notice is that everyone comes back towards the ball. They play too deep. There's no threat beyond Harry Kane. Look at the average positions of the players. 8 outfield players' average position is within 10 yards of the halfway line. It's too narrow. It's too congested. Kane is an issue in this system because of his deep position. He drifts back into that midfield area to try and pick up the ball because there's not enough creativity in there. He will get it, and then he'll spread it, but there's no one to cross the ball to by the time the wingers get into the advanced positions at the other end of the field, because he's still back foraging for the ball. If Kane is dropping, the wingers have to go wide and beyond him, and then one of your midfielders has to make the ground to get up into the box. Defensively, the system's too congested. At least there were 2 strikers to occupy, essentially 6 defensive players on Friday night. But often in international football, you're playing against 1 up front, so you don't need to play 3 and then 2. It's just unnecessary. With the 4, if you play with 4, you'll get someone that sits and then 2 either side that can connect up. So England really do need some sort of playmaker, someone who can connect the midfield with the forwards. Kane can't do both jobs. It's almost actually hurting England that he keeps coming so deep, because you haven't got anybody in the box who's as clinical. I think it's not in our interests to have him foraging backwards unless there is a defined system where you can get players beyond him. Remember the game against Spain a few years ago where he did that brilliantly? He dropped deep and then the 2 wide boys, I think it was Rashford and Sterling, went bombing on down either of the flanks. They were absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And it worked. But their system was clearly defined. I think they played a 4 that night. You've got to make sure you don't get outnumbered in midfield, and we've done that so much. Interesting point. John says, how was Saka's form at left wing-back this season? How was Sterling's form at right? Sterling didn't play at right wing-back. But anyway, Saka played at left wing-back during the game. And you're absolutely right. He's picking a player on form because he knows that Saka's playing well, right? But at the same time, Saka's not playing well at left wing-back. He's playing well right side of a 3 in attack. That's where he should be playing. Your left wing-back's got to be Ben Chilwell. He's the most progressive of your full-backs. He's the one that's playing more often than Luke Shaw at this moment in time. I think, that was the first game. There's another game on Monday night. But although I understood why he was picking the personnel, I thought the system was wrong, flawed, pragmatic, and ultimately, look, the modus operandi is don't concede goals. If you don't concede goals, then you'll eke your way through the tournament and you might end up getting yourself into a final. But ultimately, I don't think that England are in a space now where they can play like that and carry people with them, because there's a bit too much of a disconnect.
I think he's had that philosophy for a good couple of years now. Keep a clean sheet, make yourself difficult to beat, and nick it down the other end, and it gets you so far, and it got us through to the final.
It gets you so far doing
that.
But
I put a tweet out. I very rarely put tweets out, but I put a tweet out after the semi-final and said, congratulations, brilliant achievement, getting to the final, but if we play like that in the final, we're not going to win. We're 1-0 up after a couple of minutes, and we just sat back. We didn't have the courage to play, to pass in the way that Italy did. Now, I would go with 3 at the back. Why? Because I think one of our, if not our weakest department is centre-half. So you need the extra person there. You've also got one of our strongest departments. It's the right side in defence. So I feel you need almost. I'd put Walker and I'd also put Reece James there. So Walker right side of a 3, Reece James as a wing back. Now in a 3-4-3 or 3-4-2-1, what you need is those 2 wide players to be able to know when to come in and actually dominate the midfield, outnumber in midfield. But also then if Harry Kane does drop in, they go in behind. And that's the thing.
Got to happen.
Absolutely. I'd made my 11 and it wasn't very much different to Gareth Southgate's 11. So I'm thinking, well, what's not happening? And I was disappointed in Foden and Sterling on the night because I felt they didn't get involved in the game. They didn't go to look for the ball at the right times, and then they didn't go in behind at the right times. And that's something which Gareth has to sort out. It's not necessarily the team selection of the individual players, because I think you're never going to please all of the people all the time.
No.
But mostly, most people would have not argued with that 11 for that particular game.
On a sheet of paper.
Yes.
But not necessarily in the positions that they were deployed.
No. Listen, Saka has played at left back,
and he's great,
left wing back,
and he's good. Yeah,
but at international level, there was a big gap, wasn't there, between him and Maguire when they were going forward, and that can't happen. What's happened to Ben Chilwell? I don't get what's happening both at Chelsea and England. I think he's superb going forward, and he's a really good defender. Get him games, get him fit, and he would be our guy on the left. So 3-4-3. But then what you also need to do is, you don't just want 2 holders midfield, which you kind of got with Phillips and Rice.
Yeah, you can't do that.
With Bellingham in there as well, who's even said himself, he sees himself as more of an 8. He can play he's so versatile and so good. He can play in a number of positions, but he's almost an 8. So he can get forward at times as well. He's the guy that running for midfield that needs to then sometimes either help Harry Kane or even go in behind if the other 2 have dropped short.
If you're playing a back 3, the idea of playing 2 in front of that is just so clogged up and so defensive-minded.
2 holders, yes.
Yeah, you're losing so much from your team. Why not play? If you're going to play 3, you've got to play a 3 in midfield with 1 anchor, maybe your Declan Rice, and then 2 dynamic midfields in an 8 position either side of him. So a Bellingham, maybe a Foden can play a little bit deeper and be that player who has that creativity and the ability to connect. And then you play 2 strikers. So you play Kane and you play an Abraham or Kane and a Tony or something like that.
I'm trying to do my maths here. So 3 at the back.
So 3 at the back.
3 in midfield. 2 wide.
2 wide fullbacks.
Yeah.
I'm talking like James and Chilwell. But who stay high and wide. Obviously, they'll funnel back and defend. Then you play a 3 in midfield, but one of them is the defensive midfield player, and the other 2 are progressive 8s that like to get forward and join in. They've got defensive responsibilities, obviously, but they've got to get forward as well. Then you play 2 up top. That can be Sterling and Kane. It can be Tony and Kane. It can be Abraham and Kane. Whatever. But you've got to have the right dynamic so that you have that funneled in towards that centre, which is where there's an opportunity for you to score goals. But that means that your fullbacks have got to be high and wide. You've got to be Liverpool fullbacks. You've got to be up there in your face.
Dare I say, like Graham Potter's first team. I mean, he didn't have 2 strikers, but he did have Havertz off Aubameyang.
Yeah,
and
it's got to be something like that if you're going to play the 3 at the back.
Reece James down one side and Raheem Sterling down the other, but not really being asked to come back. So.
Because there's security and then there is a safe with a lock safety deposit box in it. You don't need all of that, do you? You just need basic security.
But at the same time, though, Sam, and in theory it sounds great, but you're talking about England going into a World Cup, and you have to make sure that you're doing something that everybody is comfortable with. You know, you have to find a system to suit the players you've got, not the other way around. And as I say, I think we're pretty weak in centre-back. So I actually would go for pace around Maguire. I would play Maguire. I'd go for Tomori.